In the mid-1970s, Robbinsville was a pretty and quiet community with open fields, farmland, and a slowly growing number of attractive homes. Located in bustling Mercer County, New Jersey, Robbinsville was among the smallest of its towns, with a population at that time of just under 3,500 people. The 70s was also a time of heightened awareness of many social issues, including growing concern over the environment. The Industrial Revolution that was underway in the early 1800s had shifted our society away from rural farming lifestyles into more crowded urban living, where jobs could be had at the multitude of factories. Industrial centers and factories took over where quiet, lush, natural beauty had once dominated the landscape. There had never been another time in recorded history when the land, and certainly the whole planet, could not readily neutralize whatever human activity had challenged it with. Now, however, with the unprecedented scale and sheer volume of man-made chemicals being poured into the air, water, and land, our planet and its inhabitants, including us, were beginning to bear alarming signs of toxic overload. Even though the alarm from rising levels of pollution didn't reach the greater conscious awareness of the general population until the 1970s, the signs of growing trouble had already been underway for decades. And a few very prescient individuals began to speak out long before full awareness had reached the greater core population about these concerns. As is very often the case, when one or just a few individuals see a trend before others catch on, these visionaries, even famous ones, are typically ignored or dismissed as overzealous or alarmist in their views. Such was the initial reception of one particularly significant book that raised the alarm of growing pollution concerns and ultimately ended up being the catalyst for the modern environmental action movement that has since been widely accepted and embraced as truth. The book was Silent Spring, written by wildlife biologist Rachel Carson in 1962. In 1962, Tom May, who the Thomas J. May Nature Trail located in Robbinsville's Tandem Park is named for, was just 11 years old. Despite Tom's young age, he had already accumulated an impressive personal library of books he had bought with money he earned working as a paper boy, and he had read every one of them. Rachel Carson's illuminating book, Silent Spring, was one Tom had read with rapt interest. It was the groundbreaking ideas and revolutionary thinking about the relationship between human activity and the environment that Ms. Carson set forth in Silent Spring, from which grew the seeds of inspiration and passion for environmental causes in Tom May that would shape his future, and ultimately that of Robbinsville Township as well. Tom was gifted with a wonderful intellect that fueled his curiosity and interest in many subjects, but it was clearly his concern and love of the environment and the need to protect it that was his vocational passion and calling. So it was no surprise to any of us who knew Tom that science would be his chosen field of study, with the protection of the environment his intended life's work. Tom got his undergraduate degree in geology, his master's degree in soil science, and began doctoral studies in environmental and soil science. Tom sidestepped lucrative job offers with oil companies whose environmental policies were in conflict with his values and instead chose work with the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. By the late 1970s, although still young and finding its way, the environmental movement was steadily gaining acceptance and momentum. Robbinsville had its own environmental commission, and included on the committee were former Mayor Nancy Tyndall, local educator Rosemary James, and community organizer and president of the Robbinsville Environmental Commission, Janet Van Nest, among other committee members, including Tom.
Even though the waste node, if you will, the place where most of the waste was generated in Mercer County was some distance from Washington Township. We ended up getting it. One of the freeholders said that it was all because we had fewer votes. It was as simple as that.
As we talked to people in other parts of the state and investigated, what their issues were, then we realized that this was something that definitely we did not want in our township.
Yeah.
And so this is when this coalition of people here in the town joined together and fought very hard and long. And in fact, when we went before the freeholders, we actually had a motorcade of a 2-mile long motorcade.
Yeah.
And the police escorted us.
Yeah.
And when we walked in, the freeholders said, "Is there anybody left in Washington Township?"
He said no.
We were very fortunate because Tom May, with his background in soils and geological information, was able to help us, really understand what that was all about. And the problem was that even though the state thought this was a good thing to have this impermeable clay under you,
Right.
but what they didn't realize, we didn't have public water, and most of the wells were very shallow.
We had a lot of
So
perched-
that you
lot
would
of
have perched water,
Mhm.
and that this would leach into the wells.
The determined and tireless work of Environmental Commission President Janet Van Nest, along with the rest of the team of committee members, including the invaluable contributions toward winning their battle that various members brought with their own professional expertise, such as in law, and Tom May's scientific expertise. Against all odds, the state's attempt to locate a hazardous waste landfill in Robbinsville, at that time called Washington Township, was successfully averted. Robbinsville would remain the lovely and pleasant community it has always been, and would grow into an even more prosperous and desirable place to live and raise a family.
Oh yeah, I mean, Tom was extremely passionate about the environment, about recycling. Tom recycled before recycling was popular. He would drive miles and miles to find recycling centers where he would take this stuff.
Because there was no mandated recycling
No,
yet.
back in that time, there was not a mandated recycling effort. Nobody had recycling bins in the office. Nobody had recycling bins at home. None of that happened yet. You can thank the people on the Environmental Commission in Robbinsville that you don't have a landfill in your community because of a few people who worked so hard to stop that. He and the others on this team cared. This was a labor of love. I mean, it was just people who had the same passion. They wanted the same thing for the community and for the future of Robbinsville.
The untimely tragic loss of Tom May in an accident in 1988 was a shock and a terrible blow to his family and the community. Helpless emotions of shock, grief, and irreplaceable loss, after some time, began to also include a conviction within the community to find a way to remember and honor Tom's selfless commitment to the betterment of the community and the environment. The Thomas J. May Nature Trail was the result.
The greatest thing was that residents came out with their shovels, their wheelbarrows, their rakes, and they blazed the trail as had been designed. And it was a community effort, and it turned out to be a beautiful project.
One of the most striking things about Tom was when he recognized a critical situation, I would often hear him say, "It's a real challenge." And then he would go about making the necessary changes to improve the situation. He really enjoyed the give and take of all the members of the committee and had great respect and admiration for their knowledge and dedication in localizing the environmental movement to keep the community a clean, safe, and beautiful place to live.
What I remember about Tom is what a gentle teacher he was. That whole process of rethinking what I do stayed with me for the rest of my life.
Tom was the oldest of our 4 children. He was our only son. He had 3 sisters who adored him, and he was a wonderful son. He was very caring and a fun person to be with too, besides being very intellectual. He was wise beyond his years. But he also, he loved the out of doors. And he and his father used to love to go to baseball games. And in fact, he was on a baseball team and he was the ace pitcher. So whatever he did well. And it just came naturally to him. He was very interested in people and loved people, and people loved him. And he was a very modest person. Yeah, I mean, he excelled in everything he did, but you never heard him brag about anything, and he had a lot to brag about. But that's the way he was.
Tom had so many amazing qualities. It was his goodness. It was his pure goodness that was so unique. His sense of integrity was such that he really wanted to do things because it was right. It wasn't about ego. It wasn't about self-aggrandizement. It was because it was just the right thing. He would be there when people needed him. He really believed in being there for people, and he was always willing to lend a hand. So yes, he was a very serious person. He took things very seriously, yet he had an amazing light side. He had a wonderful sense of humor. So Tom was a really amazing blend of incredible qualities that is just a rare combination to be seen in this world. And I've never known anybody else like him. I feel tremendously blessed that he was ever a part of my life. And I always will be carrying the things that I learned from him and observing the kind of person he was, his wisdom, his goodness. I will always keep with me that sense of integrity, that sense of going out and doing things for the sake of for it being the right thing and to help others and to make this world a better place. He always said that in the times when he did talk about himself, that doing the right thing and leaving this world a little better than he found it was what was so important to him.
Glad you could make it.
When you said something.
He has really made a difference for everyone, and we were fortunate. We were blessed.
Before tides of change swell large enough to carry enough weight to meaningfully alter the landscape, they typically start small, gathering volume and momentum until becoming a force of reckoning. And when it comes to the way we humans invoke change, it usually starts with just one, or perhaps a small group of people. One book, one person's actions can serve to inspire many. The compounding ripple effect of positive change can combine so that the ripples become a wave large enough to sweep in a tide of positive change. One person can make a huge difference, and the combined efforts of even just a few people can make a major difference. That is what happened in Robbinsville in the 1970s that changed the future course of the community for the betterment of the health, quality of life, beautification, and standard of living for all whom already called it home then, and for all whom have chosen it as a worthy place to live in the years since. You too can be an instrument of positive change in your community and in your world. And it all starts by standing up, lending a hand, being involved, and making your voice heard and your actions felt. You can be the change you want to see in your community and in your world. All positive change starts with the action of someone. Let that someone be you.